Have you ever felt invisible? Like no matter how hard you work, nobody sees you? Grace felt that way every single day. She was drowning in medical bills, exhausted from double shifts, and one mistake away from losing everything. Then came the night that changed it all. The night a woman in a 20,000-pound dress slapped her in front of everyone. But what happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Not even Grace. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything. A moment when one person's cruelty became another person's freedom. This happened in London, at a restaurant so fancy that even the air felt expensive. But this story isn't really about the restaurant. It's about a young woman named Grace, and the night her entire world turned upside down. Grace Miller was 24 years old, but if you looked into her eyes, you'd see someone much older. Life has a way of aging us when we carry too much weight on our shoulders. And Grace? She was carrying the world. Every morning, Grace woke up in a tiny flat in East London. The walls were thin. The heating barely worked. But it was home. More importantly, it was where her mum lived. Her mum, who was sick. The kind of sick that doesn't go away. The kind that costs money. So much money. Grace worked at the Golden Spoon, one of London's most exclusive restaurants. You know the type, where a single meal costs more than most people earn in a week. Where the rich came to be seen. Where the napkins were heavier than most people's coats. For 6 years, Grace had walked those floors. Smiled at people who never really saw her. Served people who treated her like furniture. But she did it because every pound she earned bought her mum another day of medicine. Another month of rent. Another moment of hope. The staff at the Golden Spoon weren't treated well. The manager, a man named Vincent, ran the place like a prison warden. He was the kind of man who thought being cruel made him powerful. He shouted. He threatened. He made people feel small because somewhere deep inside, he felt small too. But Grace never complained. She couldn't afford to. Her younger sister, Lily, was in university. Her mum needed constant care. Grace was the only one holding their little family together. So she swallowed her pride. She ignored the exhaustion. She kept moving forward because stopping meant everything would fall apart. On this particular evening, the restaurant was buzzing with nervous energy. Vincent had gathered the staff earlier that day. His face was red with excitement and fear. "Listen up," he'd barked. "Tonight, we're serving Dominic Ashford. Yes, the Dominic Ashford. The tech genius. The billionaire. He's bringing his fiancée. If anything goes wrong, you're all finished. Do you understand?" Everyone nodded. They understood. Dominic Ashford was a legend. A man who'd built a streaming empire from nothing. A man whose company had changed how the entire world watched entertainment. A man who could buy and sell restaurants like the Golden Spoon without even checking his bank account. Grace didn't care about the fame. She cared about the tip. A table like that could mean 3 months of her mum's medication. It could mean not having to choose between electricity and food. When Dominic Ashford walked through those doors, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, with dark hair and tired eyes. But it was the woman on his arm who commanded attention. Her name was Victoria Huntington. She walked like she owned the ground beneath her feet. Her dress sparkled under the lights, probably worth more than Grace would earn in a year. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it seemed to lift her eyebrows. And her face? Cold. Beautiful but cold. Like a statue carved from ice. Grace was assigned to their table. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the menus. This was it. The biggest table of her career. She took a deep breath and walked over. "Good evening," Grace said softly, her voice warm despite her nerves. "Welcome to the Golden Spoon. My name is Grace, and I'll be—" "We need champagne," Victoria interrupted, not even looking up from her phone. "Dom Perignon, the 2008. And make sure it's properly chilled. Last time we were here, it was practically warm." "Of course, madam," Grace replied. She glanced at Dominic, who gave her a tired nod. There was something in his eyes. Something that looked like an apology. The next hour was hell. Victoria sent back her appetizer 3 times. The soup was too hot. Then it was too cold. Then it didn't have enough salt. She complained about the lighting. She complained about the music. She complained about the temperature. Through it all, Grace smiled. She apologized. She fixed every problem. Because that's what she did. That's what invisible people do. They make everything work while nobody notices. Dominic barely spoke. He drank his whiskey and stared out the window at the London skyline. He looked like a man trapped in a cage made of gold. At one point, Grace brought fresh bread to the table. As she set it down, Dominic looked up at her. Really looked at her. For just a second, their eyes met, and Grace saw something flicker across his face. Recognition? Confusion? She couldn't tell. Then it was gone, and he looked away. Victoria snapped her fingers. Actually snapped them like Grace was a dog. Water. Now. And this time, make sure there's exactly 3 ice cubes. Not 2. Not 4. 3. Grace's cheek burned with humiliation, but she nodded. Right away, madam. As she walked back to the service station, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Lily. Mum's coughing got worse. Hospital said we need to pick up new prescription tomorrow. It's £300. Do you have it? Grace's heart sank. £300. She'd been saving for weeks, but she was still short. She typed back quickly, I'll get it. Don't worry. She had no idea how. But she'd figure it out. She always did. Because that's what invisible girls do. They carry the weight nobody else can see. Little did Grace know, in just a few minutes, everything was about to change. Her invisible life was about to explode into something she could never have imagined. The main course arrived. Grace carried the plates carefully, balancing them with the skill that comes from years of practice. Victoria had ordered the most expensive dish on the menu, the lobster, prepared with imported butter and herbs that cost more per gram than gold. Grace set the plate down gently in front of Victoria. Your lobster, madam. Please be careful, the plate is quite hot. Victoria didn't acknowledge her. She was too busy taking photos of her food from every possible angle. Flash after flash. She made Grace stand there, holding a small lamp to get the lighting just right. Other diners were staring. Grace felt her face burn with embarrassment. Move to the left, Victoria commanded. No, my left. Do you not know your left from your right? I apologize, Grace whispered, shifting position. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Victoria put her phone down. She picked up her fork, took one bite, and immediately pushed the plate away. This is unacceptable, Victoria announced loudly. Everyone in the nearby tables turned to look. This lobster is overcooked. The sauce is too rich. Take it back. And tell your chef he should be ashamed of himself. Grace's heart sank. The lobster looked perfect. But that didn't matter. Of course, madam. I'll speak with the chef immediately. I don't want you to speak with anyone, Victoria cut her off, her voice rising. I want you to understand something. Do you know who I am? Do you know who we are? She gestured dramatically at Dominic, who was rubbing his temples like he had a headache. Yes, madam, Grace said quietly. I understand You understand nothing, Victoria snapped. People like you will never understand people like us. You're here to serve. That's all you're good for. So serve properly, or find another job where you can be mediocre. The words hit Grace like physical blows. Around them, the restaurant had gone quiet. Even the kitchen noise seemed to fade. Everyone was watching. Dominic finally spoke, his voice low. Victoria, that's enough. She's just doing her job. Don't you dare defend the help, Victoria hissed at him. You're always too soft. That's your problem. You let people walk all over you. Grace stood there frozen. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. But she had a job to do. A mum who needed medicine. A sister counting on her. I'll get you something else, Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. Perhaps I don't want something else, Victoria said, her eyes narrowing. I want wine. That bottle. She pointed at the most expensive red wine on the menu. Pour it. And don't mess it up. Grace nodded. She went to the wine storage and carefully retrieved the bottle. It was worth £2,000. Her hands shook slightly as she carried it back. This bottle of wine cost more than 6 months of her mum's medication. The thought made her dizzy. She approached the table carefully. Dominic was staring out the window again, looking miserable. Victoria was on her phone, typing furiously, probably complaining about the restaurant to her thousands of followers. Grace began to pour the wine into Victoria's glass. Slowly, carefully, the dark red liquid flowed smoothly. Then Victoria moved. Without warning, without even looking, Victoria flung her arm up in a dramatic gesture while talking. I just don't understand why you won't buy me the villa in Spain, Dominic. It's not like you can't afford. Her arm hit Grace's wrist. Hard. Everything happened in slow motion. The bottle tipped. The wine arched through the air like a crimson wave. and it splashed directly across Victoria's chest, soaking into her sparkling dress. The entire restaurant went silent. Not the polite quiet from before. This was the silence of shock. The silence before an explosion. Grace stood frozen, the nearly empty bottle still in her hand. Her mind was screaming. The dress. The job. The medicine. Everything flashed before her eyes. "I'm so sorry," Grace gasped, reaching for a napkin. "It was an accident, I didn't mean. Don't touch me." Victoria's scream could have shattered glass. She leapt up from her chair, knocking it backward with a crash. "You stupid, clumsy idiot. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I'm so sorry," Grace repeated, tears starting to form in her eyes. "You moved your arm and... Are you blaming me?" Victoria's face twisted with rage. She stepped closer to Grace, invading her space. "You spill wine on my Chanel dress, and you have the audacity to blame me?" "No, I just meant," Grace's voice cracked. "I don't care what you meant," Victoria shrieked. Her face was red now, makeup starting to run with angry tears. "This dress cost £20,000. 20,000. You probably don't earn that in a year." Grace stood there, trembling. She could feel every eye in the restaurant on her. She could see Vincent at the kitchen door, his face pale with fury. She was going to be fired. Her mum's medicine. Lily's university. The rent. Everything was about to come crashing down. "Please," Grace whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning aisle." "You'll pay?" Victoria laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "With what? Your pathetic tips? You're nothing. Nothing. You're just a stupid little waitress who's too incompetent to even pour wine properly." Dominic stood up. "Victoria, stop it. That's enough." "No, it's not enough," Victoria spun toward him. "I want her fired. I want her arrested. I want..." Then she turned back to Grace. Her hand rose up. And before anyone could react, before Grace could even blink, Victoria's palm connected with Grace's face. Slap. The sound echoed through the golden spoon like a gunshot. Grace's head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across her cheek. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her face. The restaurant wasn't just silent anymore. It was frozen, like time itself had stopped. Grace stood there, tears streaming down her face, holding her burning cheek. She waited for Vincent to fire her. She waited for security to throw her out. She waited for her world to end. But the first person to move wasn't Vincent. It wasn't security. It was Dominic Ashford. And what he did next would change everything. Dominic Ashford moved slowly. He placed his whiskey glass down on the table with such careful precision that it made no sound. Then he stood up, all 6 feet 2 inches of him, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He didn't look at Victoria. Not yet. First, he looked at Grace. Really looked at her. His blue eyes scanned her face, the red handprint forming on her pale cheek, the tears streaming down, the way she was trembling but still standing. Still trying to be professional even as her world collapsed. Then Dominic reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a white handkerchief, pressed and perfect. He held it out to Grace. "Are you all right?" His voice was soft, but it carried across the silent restaurant. Grace stared at the handkerchief, confused. Was this some kind of trick? Some kind of test? She took it with shaking fingers. I'm fine, sir," she whispered. "I'm so sorry about the dress. I'll pay for it somehow, I promise." "Stop apologizing," Dominic said firmly. He turned around to face Victoria. "You need to leave." Victoria's mouth fell open. "What? What did you just say to me?" "I said you need to leave," Dominic repeated. His voice was louder now, carrying to every corner of the golden spoon. "This is over. We're over." The restaurant erupted in whispers. People were pulling out their phones. This was about to be everywhere. "You can't be serious," Victoria laughed nervously, looking around at all the watching eyes. "Julian, everyone's watching. Stop making a scene. We can discuss this at home." "No," Dominic said simply. "We're not going home. There is no home. Not anymore." He reached into his jacket again. This time, he pulled out a small velvet box. Victoria's eyes lit up immediately, her anger vanishing like smoke. "Oh, Dominic," she breathed, her whole demeanor changing. "You brought the ring? The upgraded one we talked about." Dominic opened the box. It was empty. Victoria's face fell. I don't understand." "I returned the ring 3 days ago," Dominic said coldly. "I was planning to end this tonight. Privately. Quietly. I was going to be a gentleman about it. But after what you just did..." He gestured toward Grace. "You don't deserve a gentleman. You can't break up with me," Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. The wedding is in 6 weeks. The invitations are sent. Do you know how much my father spent on the venue? Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Dominic said. His voice was like ice. I've known for months. I've watched you belittle waiters, scream at drivers, mock my assistants behind their backs. I told myself you were just stressed. That planning a wedding was hard. But tonight you crossed a line. You hit someone. You assaulted someone who was just trying to do her job. He looked back at Grace, who was still standing there in shock, clutching the handkerchief to her burning cheek. What's your full name? He asked her gently. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. Grace. Grace Miller. Dominic froze. His eyes widened. He stepped closer, studying her face more carefully, looking past the tears, past the exhaustion, past the pain. Miller, he repeated slowly. Grace Miller. From Oakwood Secondary School. Grace blinked, confused. Yes, but how did you? Oh my God, Dominic breathed. A strange expression crossed his face. Recognition mixed with disbelief, shame mixed with wonder. Grace. It's me. Dominic Hayes. From school. Grace stared at him. Dominic Hayes. The name hit her like a wave. The quiet boy who used to sit alone in the library. The one who wore the same worn-out trainers every day. The one the other kids picked on because his mom couldn't afford the right uniform. The one Grace had shared her lunch with every day for 3 years. Dom, Grace whispered. Little Dom Hayes? But you didn't have money. Dominic finished, a sad smile on his face. No, I didn't. I barely had anything. Until you. The restaurant was completely silent now. Even Victoria had stopped shrieking, staring between them in confusion and growing horror. Dominic turned to address the entire room. His voice carried authority now, the voice of a man who'd built an empire. This woman, he pointed at Grace, is the reason I'm standing here today. When I was 14 years old, I was nobody. Less than nobody. I was the poor kid. The one everyone ignored. I went to school hungry most days because my mom was working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. He looked at Grace, his eyes shining. But Grace saw me. She didn't just see me, she sat with me. She shared her food with me, even though she didn't have much either. When the teachers said I must have cheated on my exams because no poor kid could be that smart, Grace marched into the headmaster's office and fought for me. She got me into the advanced programs. She tutored me for free. She believed in me when nobody else did. Grace felt tears streaming down her face. She'd forgotten. Or maybe she'd never realized how much those small acts of kindness had meant. I spent 10 years looking for you, Dominic continued. After my first company sold, I hired investigators. But you'd moved. I thought I'd lost you forever. And then tonight, I walk into this restaurant, and there you are. Serving people who treat you like dirt. Getting abused by someone like her. He gestured dismissively at Victoria. He turned back to Victoria, his face hardening. You hit the woman who saved my life. The woman who made me who I am. So yes, Victoria. We're done. Security will escort you out. And if you even think about pressing charges or causing trouble, I have 50 witnesses who just watched you assault someone, including about 20 people with their phones out. Victoria looked around wildly. She saw all the phones recording. She saw the expressions on people's faces, not sympathy but disgust. Her face crumbled. You'll regret this, she hissed at Dominic. My father will destroy you. He has connections. He has power. Your father, Dominic interrupted calmly, is currently being investigated for fraud. The authorities received an anonymous tip about 3 hours ago. Something about falsified business records and tax evasion. I imagine he's got bigger problems right now than your broken engagement. Victoria's face went white. Without another word, security guards appeared. They took her by the arms and led her toward the exit. Her protests faded as the door closed behind her. Dominic turned back to Grace. The entire restaurant was still watching, but he didn't seem to care. Grace, he said softly, take off the apron. What? Grace's voice shook. Am I fired? No, Dominic smiled. You're promoted. The manager's office of the Golden Spoon was nothing like the restaurant below. While the dining room was all gold and crystal and elegance, up here it was dark wood and leather. It smelled like expensive cigars and secrets. Grace sat in one of the leather chairs, still in shock. Her cheek still burned where Victoria had hit her. The handkerchief Dominic had given her was clutched in her hands, now stained with her tears and a bit of blood from where Victoria's ring had cut her. Dominic sat across from her. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. He looked more human now. Less like the billionaire from the magazines, and more like the boy she used to know. I don't understand what's happening, Grace said quietly. Promoted? Dominic, I can't be promoted. I'm a waitress. I don't have qualifications. I don't have experience in management. I barely finished secondary school because I had to work to help my mum. Dominic leaned forward, his hands clasped together. Grace, do you know why I was looking for you all these years? She shook her head. Because I owed you a debt, he said simply. Not a financial debt. Something bigger. You gave me hope when I had none. You made me believe I could be more than the poor kid everyone pitied. Every success I've had, every company I've built, it all started with you believing in me. I was just being nice, Grace whispered. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, Dominic said, his voice hard. Nobody else did. Everyone else looked at me and saw nothing. You looked at me and saw potential. He stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the restaurant below. Do you know what I've built, Grace? Really built. You created Stream Vision, Grace said. The streaming service. Everyone uses it. I created an empire, Dominic corrected. Stream Vision is worth £40 billion. I own 17 other companies. I have investments in everything from technology to property to restaurants. He turned to look at her. Including this one. As of 30 minutes ago, I bought the Golden Spoon. Grace's eyes widened. You bought the restaurant? Just now. While we were sitting here. I made one phone call, Dominic said. The owner has been trying to sell for months. He was thrilled to get my offer. The paperwork will take a few days, but it's done. He smiled. And my first act as owner is to fire Vincent. Vincent, Grace repeated. Your manager, Dominic said. Or rather, your former manager. He's been stealing from this place for years. I had my people do a quick audit while we've been talking. He's been paying inflated prices to fake suppliers and pocketing the difference. The restaurant should be making 3 times what it's reporting. Grace felt dizzy. Everything was happening so fast. But if you fire Vincent, who'll run the restaurant? You will, Dominic said simply. Dominic, I can't. Yes, you can, he interrupted. Grace, you know this place better than anyone. You know what the customers want. You know which suppliers deliver quality and which ones are scams. You know which staff members actually work and which ones hide in the storage room playing on their phones. But I don't know how to run a business, Grace protested. I don't know about budgets and spreadsheets and... I have accountants who know about budgets, Dominic said. I have advisors who can teach you anything you need to learn. What I don't have is someone I trust. Someone who has integrity. Someone who won't steal from me or lie to me or use my money to line their own pockets. He knelt down in front of her chair, looking up into her eyes. I trust you, Grace. I trusted you when I was 14. I trust you now. Grace felt tears welling up again. My mum, she whispered. Dominic, my mum is sick. She needs medicine tomorrow. I was counting on tonight's tips to pay for it. If I take time off to learn how to run this place. Dominic pulled out his phone. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. Dr. Patel? It's Dominic Ashford. Yes, I know it's late. I need you to make a house call. Tonight. He looked at Grace. What's your address? Grace gave him the address of their tiny East London flat, her voice shaking. Yes, that's the one, Dominic said into the phone. Patient name is. He looked at Grace. Margaret Miller, Grace whispered. She has chronic respiratory disease. The medications are on the kitchen counter. Margaret Miller. Chronic respiratory issues, Dominic repeated. I want a full examination. I want the best treatment plan available. Cost is not a factor. Bill everything to my personal account. You'll be there in 20 minutes? Excellent. He hung up. Grace was sobbing now, but not from sadness. From relief. From overwhelming, crushing relief. Dr. Patel is the best respiratory specialist in London, Dominic said gently. He'll take care of your mum. And Grace? I'm not just paying for tomorrow's medicine. I'm covering all her medical expenses. Everything. For as long as she needs. I can't let you do that, Grace protested weakly. It's too much. I can't accept. It's not charity, Dominic said firmly. It's a signing bonus. You're going to work hard. You're going to rebuild this restaurant. You're going to make it better than it's ever been. And in return, you get a proper salary, benefits, and the security to know your family is taken care of. He smiled. Besides, you shared your sandwiches with me for 3 years. I think I can cover some medical bills. Grace laughed through her tears. It was a broken, exhausted sound, but it was genuine. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. But Dominic's expression turned serious. There's something else you need to know, Grace. Something about why Victoria was really here tonight. Grace wiped her eyes. What do you mean? Dominic walked over to Vincent's desk. He picked up a leather ledger that had been sitting there. I had my people look into this place's finances. The restaurant should be profitable, but it's barely staying afloat. Do you know why? Grace shook her head. Because Vincent has been running a money laundering scheme, Dominic said. He's been working with Victoria's father, Robert Huntington. They've been funneling dirty money through fake supplier contracts. The Huntingtons would report inflated business expenses, Vincent would confirm the invoices, and they'd split the excess. Grace felt sick. How much? About £2 million over the past 3 years, Dominic said grimly. Victoria knew. That's why she was so confident tonight. She thought she could do anything here because her family essentially owned the place through Vincent. What happens now? Grace asked. Now. Dominic smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Now we fix it. Together. 3 months later, Grace stood in front of the golden spoon and barely recognized it. The old pretentious sign was gone. In its place was something simpler, more elegant. The open table. It was opening night of the newly renovated restaurant. The line stretched around the block. Not because people wanted to see where a viral video happened, but because word had spread about something special happening here. Grace wore a simple black dress and comfortable shoes. Her choice, not some stuffy uniform. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore minimal makeup. She looked professional but real. Human. Lily stood beside her, beaming with pride. Their mum was there too, sitting in a wheelchair but smiling. Dr. Patel's treatment had worked wonders. She still had difficult days, but she was alive. Thriving, even. Are you nervous? Lily asked. Grace smiled. Terrified. You're going to be brilliant, her mum said, squeezing her hand. You've always been brilliant. The doors opened. The first customers filed in, and Grace felt her heart soar. This was really happening. The restaurant looked completely different. Gone were the stuffy velvet ropes and the pretentious gold accents. The new design was warm, welcoming. Wooden tables. Soft lighting. Real art from local artists on the walls, not expensive pieces chosen by some designer who'd never eaten here. But the biggest change was the staff. They moved with confidence now. They smiled real smiles. They weren't terrified of making mistakes anymore. Grace had kept most of the original team. The ones who'd been good at their jobs but beaten down by Vincent's cruelty. She'd let go of the ones who'd been lazy or mean to others. And she'd hired new people, people like her. Single parents working 2 jobs. Young people trying to pay for university. Immigrants building new lives. She paid them properly. Gave them health care. Treated them like human beings. Revolutionary concepts in the restaurant industry. The chef, a woman named Priya who'd been stuck as a sous chef under Vincent's regime, had completely redesigned the menu. No more pretentious French cuisine that nobody really wanted. Now they served food that actually tasted good. Comfort food elevated. Simple ingredients done perfectly. As Grace walked through the dining room, she saw Dominic sitting at a corner table. He caught her eye and raised his glass in a silent toast. He'd been true to his word. He owned the building and covered the major expenses, but he let Grace run everything. He never interfered. Never micromanaged. He trusted her. That trust had terrified her at first. She'd spent 3 months working 18-hour days, learning everything she could. How to read financial statements. How to negotiate with suppliers. How to handle difficult customers without being walked over. How to lead a team without being a tyrant. She'd made mistakes. Lots of them. But Dominic had been patient. Every successful person has failed more times than unsuccessful people have tried, he'd told her once. The difference is we keep going. Now, on opening night, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. A waiter approached her, James, a former construction worker who'd been laid off and needed a new start. Grace, table 7 is asking for you. Grace walked over. An elderly couple sat there, both dressed nicely but not expensively. They reminded her of her grandparents. Everything all right? Grace asked warmly. The woman dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. We just wanted to thank you. We read about what you've done here. We're both retired teachers. We never could afford places like this used to be. But tonight we could. And the food. She smiled. The food was perfect. Grace felt her throat tighten. Thank you. That means everything. As the night went on, Grace realized something profound. She'd spent years being invisible, serving people who looked through her, accepting cruelty because she thought she had no choice. She'd believed the lie that people like her, poor people, struggling people, had to accept whatever scraps were thrown their way. But that was wrong. She had value. She had dignity. She had skills and intelligence and worth. She'd always had them. The only thing that had changed was that now she believed it too. Around 10 p.m., there was a commotion at the door. Grace's security guard, yes, she had security now, approached her quickly. "Someone's trying to get in," he said quietly. "Says she's on the list. Victoria Huntington." Grace's blood ran cold. She hadn't seen Victoria since that night. She knew the woman had been arrested briefly, though her father's lawyers had gotten her out. The trial for the money laundering scheme was still ongoing. "Should I turn her away?" the guard asked. Grace thought about it. Part of her wanted to say yes. Wanted to refuse entry, to make Victoria feel how it felt to be rejected and humiliated. But that would make her no better than Victoria had been. "No," Grace said quietly. "Let her in. Treat her like any other customer." Victoria entered looking different. Her designer clothes were still expensive, but less showy. Her makeup was lighter. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. She walked up to Grace, her eyes downcast. "I know I have no right to be here," she said quietly. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. What I did was unforgivable. I was cruel. I was wrong." Grace studied her face. She looked for signs of manipulation, of fake tears or practiced sincerity. But all she saw was a broken woman who'd lost everything and was trying to figure out who she was without her father's money and her fiancé's status. "Thank you for the apology," Grace said calmly. "I accept it." Victoria's eyes widened. "You do?" "Yes," Grace said. "Because I'm not going to carry anger around anymore. I'm not going to let what you did define me. I'm free of you, Victoria. Completely free." Victoria nodded slowly. She turned to leave, but Grace stopped her. "Victoria?" She turned back. "If you want to stay for dinner, you can," Grace said. "Just like anyone else. No special treatment. No exceptions. But you're welcome here." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She nodded and quietly took a seat at a small table in the back. Later, as Grace was closing up, Dominic approached her. "You didn't have to let her stay." "I know," Grace said. "But that's the point of this place. The open table. Everyone's welcome. Rich, poor, kind, struggling. Everyone deserves a seat at the table. Everyone deserves to be seen." Dominic smiled. "You're going to change more than just this restaurant, Grace. You're going to change how people think about all of this." Grace looked around at her restaurant. At her staff cleaning up, laughing with each other. At her mom and sister waiting by the door to walk home with her. At the success she'd built not from luck, but from hard work and refusing to give up. "Maybe," she said. "But for now, I'm just happy to have changed my own life." As they locked up and stepped into the cool London night, Grace felt something settle deep in her chest. Peace. Real, genuine peace. She wasn't invisible anymore. She never had been, really. She'd just been waiting for the world to catch up to what she'd always known deep down. That every person has value. That kindness matters. That how you treat people when they can't do anything for you reveals who you really are. The slap that had threatened to destroy her had actually freed her. It had exposed the cruelty that hides behind wealth and status. It had reconnected her with someone who understood what it meant to struggle. And most importantly, it had shown her that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. Grace looked up at the sign, the open table, and smiled. This wasn't just a restaurant. It was proof that the invisible people, the struggling people, the ones society overlooks, they're the ones who often have the most to offer. They just need someone to believe in them. Or better yet, they need to believe in themselves. 6 months later, the Open Table had become one of London's most talked about restaurants. Not because of drama or viral videos, but because of what it represented. Hope. Dignity. Second chances. Grace had opened 3 more locations, each one employing people who needed a fresh start. Single mothers. Former prisoners trying to rebuild their lives. Young people from rough neighborhoods who just needed an opportunity. Victoria never returned after that first night, but Grace heard she'd started volunteering at a homeless shelter. Maybe people could change. Maybe hitting rock bottom was what some people needed to find their humanity. As for Dominic, he and Grace remained close friends. Nothing romantic. They both agreed their connection was deeper than that. They were survivors who'd lifted each other up. That bond was unbreakable. On the anniversary of the slap, as it came to be known, Grace stood in front of her staff, now over 100 people across 4 locations. They'd gathered for their monthly meeting. "I want to tell you something," Grace said, her voice steady and strong. "A year ago, I was invisible. I was struggling. I was one bad night away from losing everything. But I kept going. I kept trying. I kept believing that tomorrow might be better than today." She looked around at all the faces watching her. People who'd been homeless, people who'd been abused, people who'd been told they'd never amount to anything. "You are not invisible," she continued, her voice rising with emotion. "You matter. Your story matters. Your struggle matters. And if anyone ever makes you feel small, if anyone ever treats you like you're less than human, remember this. Their cruelty says everything about them and nothing about you." The room erupted in applause. That night, Grace went home to a proper flat. Not a mansion, she didn't need that, but a comfortable place with heat that worked and enough room for her mom and sister. They had dinner together, laughing about something silly Lily had done at university. Her mom, now in much better health thanks to consistent medical care, squeezed Grace's hand across the table. "I'm so proud of you, love. Not because you're successful. I've always been proud of you. But because you stayed kind. Despite everything, you stayed kind." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "Someone told me once that kindness is the only thing that really matters. I'm just finally starting to believe it." Later that night, alone in her room, Grace looked at herself in the mirror. The same hazel eyes looked back at her. The same face. But something fundamental had changed. She stood differently, held her head higher, smiled more easily. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, terrified, exhausted, invisible. She wanted to reach back through time and tell that girl, "Hold on. It gets better. You get stronger. And one day, you'll realize that the hardest moments of your life were actually preparing you for your greatest triumph." Grace turned off the light and climbed into bed. Tomorrow, she had meetings with investors who wanted to franchise the open table concept. She had interviews with 3 news programs. She had 100 emails waiting in her inbox. But tonight, she just wanted to rest, to be grateful, to remember that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best ones. Because that's what the slap had been for her. Not an ending, a beginning. And as she drifted off to sleep, Grace smiled. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. You can't keep a good person down. You can ignore them. You can mistreat them. You can try to break them. But if they refuse to quit, if they keep believing in themselves, if they remember their worth, they'll rise. They'll always rise. And when they do, they'll change the world. Remember, friends, your value isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself and others, especially when no one's watching. Stay kind. Stay strong. Keep believing. Your moment is coming.